Welcome to the Get Real with King Arthur show. I wasn't here last week. I was at a writers' conference in Massachusetts. And so I'm back, and I believe we have a few new members today, if I'm not mistaken. But we have a lot of old ones. And I am back on the subject of philosophy and I. And trying to detail just how I came back to philosophy after 3 courses in college that didn't take, really. And so I came to philosophy in the back door through 20th century philosophy and 21st century philosophy, through rhetoric and language, linguistics, mainly rhetoric. And I mentioned that when I took philosophy in college, it was so abstract, trying to find the absolute truth out there and whatever. And it was Martin Heidegger who talked about my experience and how I access the world. And one of the great questions of philosophy is, how does a person interact with what's out there? How do we know what's out there? How do we decode it? So Heidegger talks about my experience, which is that I personally discover what's out there only when I have to. He calls it the broken hammer idea. In other words, I don't see anything until really it doesn't work. It's broken. So, for example, in an automobile, I rode in a car last week, and something was wrong. It wouldn't start. Well, it's all under the hood there. I don't know what's there. Well, it turns out that it wasn't the starter. I don't even know how that works, but the battery. Well, I do know something about batteries. But anyway, we only are aware of something when it doesn't work. And it really ties in also with another concept. And I mentioned the 20th century rhetorician Kenneth Burke. It ties in with the idea that accessing what doesn't work is a process. For example, so I see something that doesn't work, and I try to fix it, okay? I don't try to theorize about it. For example, one philosopher says, you never see the total thing at one time. You may see 3 sides, but there's always a bottom or top or back you don't see. Well, anyway, I look at life through broken hammers. And it also relates to a basic philosophical idea that kind of rephrases what Emmanuel Descartes said earlier in the late 17th century. He said that where we start is, I think. That's the only thing I know, basically. I think, therefore I am. Well, I don't think a baby really thinks. I think I would change that statement from not I think, therefore I am, but I ought, therefore I am. And some philosophers agree with me on that that basically we are driven by ought. I ought, it ought. And therefore the broken hammer, it's something, it is working as an ought. And I think what we're driven, not by just thinking, but ought. I ought to behave. I ought not to touch a hot stove. I ought to get some food. And then that's the world out there, then the world inside. I ought to do what I am told because my father brought a hairbrush and he's bald. Something like that. An old song that had I resolve to do what I am told, for my father brought a hairbrush and he's bald. Well, anyway, I ought. And so we have a dynamic situation here. And that's what writing is about. It's about the writer address, or the speaker. Whenever you talk, you're talking to an audience or spectator, and there's something is broken. They don't think the way they should think. Usually they just don't know something that you want to tell them about, or they don't act the right way, or they don't feel the right way. Okay? Why would you talk to them otherwise? And so usually it's you hear something you don't know. Every article you read, everything you hear is trying to change you, right? So now when you read a newspaper article, it doesn't start and say, now, reader, there's something wrong with you. You don't know about Afghanistan. Why don't you know? We better listen, I'm going to tell you. So all of teaching, all of communication, and you need to know that too. You know, I'm guilty of giving too much advice. People don't like to be changed all the time. I have to get at myself. Stop giving advice. When I was at the summer prep school in Maine, mostly teenage boys, and I had to inspect their rooms in the morning. And one of them wrote in his theme, Mr. Siemens comes in the room telling us what to do, how to make the bed, how to clean the floor, and he leaves giving us advice. Well, anyway, so you need to be careful about telling people what's wrong with them. And later on, I'm going to talk about how you soften that blow. Do you like someone who's always telling you, you know, you ought to know about something or other. I'm going to tell you. You get tired of that. But it's the only way we can teach, isn't it? So we're going to talk about how to handle that later on. But remember that whenever we face the outside world or outside people, something is broken. It ought, I ought, it ought, therefore I am. Well, here I am talking to you and giving advice. I'm sorry. Have a good week.